Prapathaka 6, Prapathaka 4. The exposition of the Soma sacrifice continued. Mantra 641. By means of the sacrifice, Prajapati created offspring. Verily he created them by the subsidiary sacrifices, and that he offers the subsidiary sacrifices verily thus. The sacrificer creates offspring. He cuts off from the hind part, for from the hind portion offspring are born. He cuts off from the thick side, for offspring are born from the thick side. He cuts off without confusion, to prevent confusion of the vital airs. He does not turn it round. If he were to turn it round, disease would be likely to seize his offspring. Go to the ocean, hail. He says verily thus, he produces seed. Go to the atmosphere, hail. He says verily, by means of the atmosphere, he begets offspring for him. For in accord with the atmosphere, offspring are born. Go to the god Sevatar, hail. He says verily, instigated by Sevatar, he begets offspring for him. Go to day and night, hail, he says. Verily by means of day and night he begets offspring for him. For in accord with day and night offspring are born. Go to Mitra and Varuna, hail, he says. Verily he bestows expiration and inspiration on offspring when born. Go to Soma, hail, he says. For offspring have Soma for their deity. Go to the sacrifice, hail, he says. Verily he makes offspring fit for the sacrifice. Go to the meters, hail, he says. The meters are cattle, verily humans cattle. Go to the sky and the earth, hail, he says. Verily, on either side he supports offspring. When born of the sky and earth, go to the clouds of the sky, hail. He says, verily he procures rain for offspring when born. Go to Agni Ispanara, hail. He says, verily he establishes in this world offspring when born. He makes a portion of the vital airs, who makes a portion of the intestines. Give me mind and heart. He says, verily he summons the vital airs according to their places. When the beast is offered, pain reaches its heart. It gathers round the heart, spit. If he were to place the heart spit on the earth, he would cause pain to the earth. If on the waters, he would cause pain to the waters. He places it in the meeting place of dry and wet. To appease both, he should think of whomsoever he hates. Verily, he causes him pain. So each has its portion, but the downside of the sacrifice, you could say, is connected with your opposition. Mantra 642. The gods divided the sacrifice on the Agni's altar. Of what was left over, they said, let this remain here. That is why the Vasativari waters have their name. But in the morning they could not arrange to divide it. They placed it in the waters. When they became the Vasativaris, he takes the Vasativaris. The Vasativaris are the sacrifice. Barely having taken from the beginning the sacrifice, he says, with it, if the sun set on one who has not taken the waters, his sacrifice would not be begun. He would split the sacrifice. He should either take waters with radiance in them, or having deposited gold, he takes them with light in them, or he should take them from the tank of a Brahmin who performs many sacrifices, for he is the one who has taken the Vasativaris. He takes the Vasativaris. The Vasativaris are cattle. Verily, having taken cattle, From the beginning, he stays with them. If he were to take them along the stream, his cattle would be likely to wander from him. He takes them standing against the streams. Verily he obstructs cattle and seizes them for him. Indru slew Vitra. He died upon the waters. Of them what was pure, fit for sacrifice, and divine, that was set free. They became the Vahantis. He takes of the Vahantis. Verily, he takes those of waters, which are pure, fit for sacrifice, and divine. He should not pass over the nearest Vahantis. If he were to pass over the nearest Vahantis, he would despise the sacrifice. He should not take of the stagnant waters. The stagnant waters are seized by Varuna. If he were to take of stagnant waters, he would cause Varuna to seize his sacrifice. If it is done by day, the night enters the waters, and therefore the waters appear dusky by day. If it is done by night, the day enters the waters. Therefore the waters appear shining by night. He takes them at the union of shade and light. Verily for him he secures the color of day and night. These waters are rich in oblation. He says, verily he takes them, made into an oblation. Rich in oblation be the sun. He says, verily he takes them with light in them. He takes with an anishtub. The anishtub is speech. Verily with the whole of speech he takes them. He takes with a verse of 4 feet. He places them thrice. They make up 7. The Sakvari has 7 feet. The Sakvari is cattle. Verily he wins cattle for this world. The Garhapatya is established. For yonder, the Ahavaniya, if he were to place them on the Garhapatya, he would have cattle in the world. If on the Ahavaniya, in yonder world, he would have cattle. He places them on both. Verily he makes him have cattle in both worlds. He carries them on the Agnid's altar. The Agnid's altar is the invisible part of the sacrifice. Verily he places them on the invisible part of the sacrifice. Wherever in the performance of a sacrifice nothing is done in that place, the Rakshasas infest the sacrifice. In that he takes of the Vahantis, that part of the sacrifice lies being performed to prevent the infestation of the Rakshasas, for they do not move them, but they lie around until the third pressing for the continuity of the sacrifice. Now, those in-between points are those transition points. Make a very good time to see spiritual things, or your auras, or that sort of thing. The light and the darkness and the light, the twilight, the sunrise, the midday, the evening. Mantra 643. The theologians say, he indeed would be an Advaryu, who in making Soma descend should make it descend for all the gods. To the heart thee, he says, verily he makes it for men. To mind thee, he says, verily he makes it for the Pitres. To the sky thee, to the sun thee, he says, verily he makes it for the gods. So many are the gods, verily he makes it descend for them all. Before the utterance of speech, he begins the morning litany. Verily he wins all that there is of speech. The waters is the first thing he utters. The waters are the sacrifice. Verily over the sacrifice he utters speech. He recites all kinds of meters. The meters are cattle. Verily he wins cattle. For one who desires brilliance, he should conclude with the Gayatri verse. For one who desires power, with the Trishtub verse. For one who desires cattle with the Jagati verse, for one who desires support with an Anushtub verse, for one who desires the sacrifice with a Pankta verse, for one who desires food with the Vivraj verse, let Agni kindled with the kindling stick hear my appeal. He says, verily, instigated by Savitar, having made proclamation to the gods, he goes for the waters. O Hotar, give directions for the waters. He says, for an action which is directed, it is done, O bull priest of the Ma Itra Varuna, run hither, he says. Mitra and Varuna are the leaders of the waters. Verily with them he goes for them. O divine waters, child of water, he says, verily by the oblation requiting them he seizes them. Then he takes of them, made into an oblation, and covered with ghee, thou art the dragger, he says, until he removes dirt from them. I draw you for the sustenance of the ocean. He says, therefore the waters, though eaten and drunk, do not waste away. The pit is the birthplace of the sacrifice. The Vasativaris are the sacrifice. Bringing the bowls of the Hotar and the Maitra Varuna into contact, he pours in the Vasativaris reciprocally, so that the sacrifice may have its birthplace. Verily he produces it from its own birthplace. O Adavaru, didst thou seek the water, he says. They came to me, look upon them. In effect, he says, if it is an Agnishtoma, he makes a libation. If an Uktha, he rubs butter on the enclosing sticks. If it is an Atiratra, he goes forward uttering a text to distinguish the sacrifices. An Ukthya, okay, is what I meant to say. And when they say gods, they mean the light beings, the unfallen angels, as we would say in the West, the Malaika, the Ahura. Well, the Devas is the term we're using here. Probably because you see, they're like provoked by another and all this other stuff rather than being of a completely independent law on their own. Mantra 644. On the instigation of God Savitar, with these words, he takes up the pressing stone. For instigation, with the arms of the Asthans, he says, for the Asthans were the Avarus of the gods. With the hands of Pushan, he says, for support. The Soma is cattle, the Upa Masu, pressing stone, is cross-breathing in that he measures round the Upa Masu, pressing stone. He confers cross-breathing upon cattle to Indra thee, with these words. He measures, for the Soma is taken for Indra. 5 times he measures with the text. The Pankta has 5 syllables. The sacrifice is 5-fold. Verily he wins the sacrifice. 5 times he measures. In silence, these make up 10. The Viraj has 10 syllables. The Viraj is food. Verily he wins food by the Viraj. Ye are savory, conquerors of Vitra. He says, this is the Soma drinking of the waters. He who knows thus reaches not destruction in the waters. With thy light, which is in the sky, he says, verily from these worlds he gathers him, Soma the king, reflected on the quarters. He enters the quarters, forward, behind, upward, downward. He says, verily from the quarters he gathers him. Verily also he wins the quarters for him. O mother, come forth. He says, women are likely to desire him who knows thus. They are unerring, watchful name, O Soma. He says, this is Soma's. Soma drinking, he who knows thus reaches not destruction from Soma. When they press Soma, they kill him. He keeps back shoes, verily he protects him. The shoots are the vital heirs. Soma is cattle, he later lets go. The shoots, verily he bestows vital heirs upon cattle, 2 by 2 he lets them go. Therefore the vital heirs earn pairs. Did I say shoes instead of shoots at one of those? But, it's when I'm recording this, it is Mother's Day. And although that's a greeting card company, and I wouldn't recommend celebrating anything that the companies come up for us, nor anything that, as a holiday that humans have invented to, honor their heroes or whatever they're coming up with. Because holidays is something separate from just something happened on this day or whatever. It is interesting, the fact is like, well, how somebody treats their mother should be more important than, these other things that people tend to look at. It's like, oh, somebody's doesn't have much money, or they're not the best looking person in the world, or they're not, there's something else about their physical prowess that is not liked. Mantra 645. The Upamsu cup is breath. In that, the cups are drawn beginning with the Upamsu. They follow on breath. Aruna Apabasi used to say, at the morning pressing I establish the sacrifice, and then I proceed with it. When it has been established, he first presses 8 times. The Gayatri has 8 syllables. The morning pressing is connected with the Gayatri. Verily thereby he obtains the morning pressing. He presses 11 times on the second occasion. The Trishtub has 11 syllables. The midday pressing is connected with the Trishtub. Verily thereby he obtains the midday pressing. He presses 12 times on the third occasion. The Jagati has 12 syllables. The third pressing is connected with the Jagati. Verily thereby he obtains the third pressing. This is what he calls the establishment of the sacrifice to prevent loss. For what falls when the sacrifice is established is not lost, or rather they say the Gayatri is not open to question at the morning pressing. He who knows thus is not liable to question from his foe. Therefore 8 times in each case should press. The theologians say other cups are drawn with a strainer. What strainer has the Upamasu? Speech is the strainer. He should reply, be pure for the Lord of speech, O strong one, he says. Verily by speech he purifies him. With the shoots of the male, he says, for the shoots of the Soma are the shoots of the male. Purified by the arms, he says, for by the arms he purifies him. Thou art the God, purifier of gods, he says, for he being a God is the purifier of gods to those thee whose portion thou art, he says, for he draws him for those whose portion he is. Thou art he who is appropriated, he says. Verily he makes breath his own. Make our food full of sweetness for us, he says. Verily he makes all food sweet for him. To all the powers of sky and earth thee, he says. Verily upon both gods and men he bestows the vital airs. May mind enter thee, he says. Verily he attains mind. Fare along the broad atmosphere, he says. For the breath has the atmosphere as its deity. Hail, thee of kindly nature, to the sun, he says. The gods of kindly nature are the breath. Verily in them he secretly offers to the gods that drink the rays thee, he says. The gods that drink the rays are the rays of the sun. That is their share. Verily thereby he delights them. If he desire may Parjanya rain, he should rub the cup with the palm of the hand downward. Verily he brings down the rain. If he desire may it not rain, he should rub with the hand upwards. Verily he keeps up the rain. If he practice witchcraft, slay Naman Niskio, then will I sacrifice to thee. He should say, verily desiring the libation, he slays him. If he be far away, he should say. He should stand until he is weary. Verily, he follows his breath and slays him. If he practice witchcraft, he should put it down with the words, I set thee down on the breath of Naman Niskio. The breath is restless. Verily, he brings his breath to rest. He purifies by means of 6 shoots. The seasons are 6. Verily, he purifies him by means of the seasons. Thrice he purifies these worlds. Are 3. Verily, he purifies him by means of these worlds. The theologians say, for what reason is it that the 3 animals take by the hand? In that 3 he draws separately the upambasu with his hand. And therefore there are 3 animals which take by the hand: man, elephant, and ape. Well, does the elephant take things by its hand? I know it grabs by its trunk. And what is upamsu? What's that mean? And as much as some of these we're seeing this translated Latin phrase, namen nescio, and, in grimoires and all that stuff, let us remember that all these spiritual formulas that we go over, it's for us to place ourselves in its usage, are those that we're regarding. It's not just some empty thing to go over. Mantra 646. Whatever the gods did as the sacrifice, that the asuras did. The gods saw that the sacrifice must be established in the upamsu cup. They established it in the upamsu. The asuras, grasping the thunderbolt, attacked the gods. The gods, in fear, ran up to Indra. Indra obstructed them by means of the antaryama cup, and that is why the antaryama has its name, the obstructor, and that the antaryama cup is drawn. Verily thus the sacrificer obstructs his foes. Through thee I interpose the sky and earth. I interpose the broad atmosphere. He says, verily with these worlds the sacrificer obstructs his foes. The gods reflected, Indra hath now become what we are, they said. O bounteous one, give us a share. In unison with the gods, the lower and the higher, he replied to both. The Satsav gods, the lower and the higher, he gave a share. In unison with the gods, the lower and the higher, he says to both. The Satsav gods, the lower and the higher, he gives a share. O bounteous one, do thou rejoice. In the Antaryama, he says, verily he does not cut off the sacrificer from the sacrifice. Thou art taken with the support, he says, for the support of inspiration. If both cups were drawn without a filter, inspiration would follow expiration. He would be likely to die. The Antaryama is drawn with a filter to separate expiration and inspiration. The Upamsu and the Antaryama cups are expiration and inspiration. The Upamsu pressing stone is cross-breathing. If he desire of a man, may he be likely to die, he should set them down for him without being in contact. Barely he severs his expiration and inspiration. From cross-breathing, swiftly he dies. If he desire of a man, may he live all his days, he should set them down for him in contact. Rarely he connects his expiration and inspiration with cross-breathing. He lives all his days. And you could say, in a way, we all live all our days. But we don't want to give ourselves a reason to be prematurely dead, do we? But long life is not the point of it, just like we saw elsewhere. I'm not sure if the Black Yajurveda was what we're talking about, but elsewhere in the Vedas, we have this idea is like, if you're just living long and being wealthy, you're kind of a loser. There's more to it than that. Mantra 647. The cup for Indra and Vayu is speech, in that the cups are drawn, beginning with that to Indra and Vayu. Verily they follow speech. The gods said to Vayu, let us slay Soma, the king. He replied, let me choose a boon. Let your cups be drawn with mine first. Therefore the cups are drawn with those for Indra and Vayu first. They slew him. He became putrid. The gods could not endure him. They said to Vayu, make him sweet for us. He replied, let me choose a boon. Let your vessels be said to have me as their deity. Therefore, being of various deities, they are said to have Vayu as their deity. Verily did Vayu make him sweet for him. Therefore, what becomes putrid, they hang out in a windy place where Vayu is its purifier, its sweetener. They could not find its distribution. Aditya said, let me choose a boon, then shall ye distribute through me. Verily with me as deity may your Soma trots be set down. Thou art taken with the support, he says, and thereby have they Aditya for their deity. For those vessels that are made of wood are born from her womb. Those that are made of clay are clearly hers. Therefore he says thus, speech aforetime spoke without discrimination. The god said to Indra, do thou discriminate this speech for us. He replied, let me choose a boon. Let this cup be drawn for me and for Vayu together. Therefore the cup is drawn together for Indra and Vayu. Indra, approaching it in the midst, discriminated it. Therefore is speech spoken distinctly. Therefore is it drawn once in the middle for Indra and twice for Vayu. For he chose two boons. And it's not just the material substances which we are dealing with. It is what is the nature, or what is the case regarding this entity, that entity, or this name, or that name. Mantra 648. The god said to Mitra, let us slay Soma, the king. He replied, not I, for I am the friend of all. They answered, still we will slay him. He replied, let me choose a boon. Let them mix the Soma for me with milk. Therefore they mix with milk the Soma for Mitra and Varuna. From him cattle departed, saying, he that was a friend hath done a cruel deed. A cruel deed, as it were, does he do who sacrifices with Soma. From him cattle depart, in that he mixes with milk the Soma for Mitra and Varuna. He unites Mitra with cattle, and the sacrificer with cattle. Aforetime indeed was Mitra thus aware, when I have done this cruel deed, cattle will depart from me. Therefore he chose thus. The gods said to Varuna, with thee as helper, we will slay Soma, the king. He replied, let me choose a boon for me, Mitra and Varuna, for me and Mitra, together with. Let this cup be drawn. Therefore it is drawn for Mitra and Varuna together. Therefore with a king as helper, they slay a king with a Vaisya, with a Sudra. This was not the day or night, but undiscriminated. The god said to Mitra and Varuna, make this to shine forth for us, He replied, "Let us choose a boon. Let one cup only be drawn before ours." Therefore the cup for Indra and Vayu is drawn. Before that for Mitra and Varuna, for the Pamsu and the Antargama cups are expiration and inspiration. Mitra produced the day, Varuna the night. Then indeed did this shine forth, in that a cup is drawn for Mitra and Varuna as for shining forth. Now the Western Mithraism has, the midnight sun and all that stuff, so the night has become part of that cult too. So Mitra and Varuna are combined in Mithraeus, or Jesus, or whichever term people are going to use for that. And I'm not meaning to say that all these things are gods. Perhaps there's a divine quality behind that, like one of the Shem HaPorash angel names, like Michael's not the god, but, Mike is the god. Gaber's the god, but not Gabriel, that sort of thing. Mantra 649. The head of the sacrifice was cut. The gods said to the Asthans, "Ye are physicians, do ye replace the head of the sacrifice?" They replied, "Let us choose a boon. Let there be drawn a cup for us also herein." For them they drew this cup for the Asthans. Then indeed they replaced the head of the sacrifice, in that the cup for the Asthans is drawn, it is to restore the sacrifice. The gods said of these two, "Impure are they, wandering among men and physicians. Therefore a Brahmin should not practice medicine, for the physician is impure, unfit for sacrifice." Having purified them by the Bahish Pavamana Stotra, they drew for them this cup for the Asthans. Therefore the cup for the Asthans is drawn when the Bahish Pavamana has been sung. Therefore, by one who knows thus, the Bahish Pavamana should be performed. Verily he purifies himself. Their skill as physicians they deposited in 3 places. In Agnet a third, in the waters a third, in the Brahman a third. Therefore one should put beside him a pot of water, and sit on the right hand of a Brahman, and practicing medicine. All medicine he performs thereby. His remedy becomes effective. The theologians say, for what reason are cups for 2 deities drawn 1 vessel, but offered in 2, and that the cups are drawn in 1 vessel. Therefore there is 1 breath within, they are offered in 2 vessels, therefore the breaths outside are in pairs. Those that are for the 2 deities are the breaths. The Inda is cattle. If he should summon the Inda before those that are for 2 deities, he would obstruct his breaths by cattle. He would be likely to perish. Having eaten those for 2 deities, he summons the Inda. Having placed the breaths in himself, he summons the Ida. The cup for Indra and Vayu is speech. That for Mitra and Varuna is the eye. That for the Asmans is the ear. He eats in front. That for Indra and Vayu. Therefore in front he speaks with speech. In front that for Mitra and Varuna. Therefore in front he sees with the eye, moving all around. That for the Asmans. Therefore on all sides he hears with the ear. Those for 2 deities are the breaths. He sets down full vessels. Therefore the breaths are full within. Wherever in the performance of the sacrifice nothing is done, in that place the Rakshasas attack the sacrifice, in that he sets down full vessels. The part of the sacrifice being performed is deposited to prevent the entry of the Rakshasas. He sets down in the north track of the southern oblation part. Verily he places speech and speech, they lie there, until the 3rd pressing, for the continuity of the sacrifice. And That's why it's important when you have an experience with your rituals, just keep doing the ritual. Because sometimes your ability to experience, or even the beings that would be coming to hang out, and might not be there, right? And by gods, I mean also that I'm not worshiping them. Not only am I not considering them as deities, I'm not worshiping them, because obviously, you can say things aren't God, your God, or whatever all you want, but if you're worshiping them, or praying to them. So, Mentor 6410, Prapathaka, and was the Purohita of the gods. Kanda and Marka of the Asuras. The gods had the holy power, Brahman. The Asuras had the holy power, Brahman. They could not overcome one another. The gods invited Kanda and Marka. They replied, "Let us choose a boon. Let cups be drawn for us also herein." For them, they drew these cups for Sukra and Manthan. Then did the gods prosper. The Asuras were defeated. He for whom knowing. Thus, these Sukra and Manthan cups are drawn. Prospers himself. His foe is defeated. Having driven away these two, the gods offered to themselves. To Indra, driven away are Sunda and Marka together. With Namaneskio, he should say of whom he hates. With him whom he hates, he thus drives them away. This is the first preparer, all maker, with these words. They offered to themselves, to Indra, these cups. For Indra kept making these forms. The Sukra is yonder sun, the Manthan is the moon. They depart towards the east, closing their eyes, therefore men do not see them as they go east. Turning back towards the west, they sacrifice, therefore men see them going west. The Sukra and the Manthan are the eyes of the sacrifice. The high altar is the nose. They offer having gone round the altar on both sides. Therefore the eyes are on either side of the nose. Therefore the eyes are held apart by the nose. They walk round on all sides to smite away the Rakshasas. Now the offering the gods made on the east. With them they drove away the Asuras who were in front. With those on the west they drove away the Asuras who were behind. Other sacrifices are made in the east. The Sukra and the Manthan on the west, barely behind and in front, the sacrificer drives away his foes. Therefore offspring are engendered behind and are brought forth in front. In accordance with the Sukra and the Manthan are offspring born, the eaters and the eaten, engendering heroic offspring, come forth. Sukra with pure radiance, engendering prolific offspring, come forth. Manthan with mixed radiance, he says, the eaten are those who are heroic, the eaten those that are prolific. The offspring of him who knows thus becomes an eater not eaten. The eye of Prajapati swelled, it fell away, it entered the Kankata, it did not stay in the Kankata. It entered barley, it stayed in barley. That is why barley has no name, has its name, in that the Manthan vessel is of the Kankata, and he mixes with groats. Verily thus he gathers together the eye of Prajapati. The theologians say, for what reason does the Manthan vessel not go to the Satas? It is the vessel of misfortune. He should say, if it were to go there, the Advaryu would be blind. He would be ruined. Therefore it does not go there. I don't know why steel coat steel cut is a little bit more expensive than some other varieties. Of course, the rolled oats, that might be more effort. I don't know. It's the cheapest way to have oats, but we're not talking about oats here. I don't think they had oats. And I didn't mean it has its name. So again, we see some of these naming myths. But the thing that I'm reminded of most is like that thing that the Quran has, where Satan says, where the thing is that as far as basically the passage is that as far as we are believing servants, so believing in doing the right deeds, then no power is had over us by Satan, and of course the rest of the asuras. And so the side of ultimate divinity with the devas and all that stuff, well, as long as asuras were being served, they didn't have power in that regard. And no, I'm not saying that people in doing wrong can't hurt people who have done right. Because people are going to argue that. It's like, no, people don't necessarily deserve the wrong things that have been done to them. Mantra 6.4.11. Even if they do, it's still wrongdoing. Whatever the gods did at the sacrifice the asuras did, the gods saw the cups with the agrayana at their head. He drew them, then indeed they reached the top. He for whom, knowing thus, the cups are drawn with the agrayana at their head, reaches the top of his equals, with a verse containing the word destructive. He should draw for him who has a rival. Verily, having destroyed his rival, he reaches the top of his equals. Ye gods that are 11 in the sky, he says, so many are the deities. Verily, he draws it for all of them. This is thy birthplace to all gods thee. He says, for it has the all gods for its deity. Speech departed from the gods, not being willing to remain for the sacrifices. When speech had departed, the gods silently drew the cups. Speech reflected, they are excluding me. It went into the agrayana. That is why the agrayana has its name. Therefore, in the agrayana speech is uttered, and that the former cups are drawn in silence. That is as when the hunter lets go his arrow, thinking, so far off is my mark, that so far I shall not miss. The Avaryu, taking the agrayana, commencing the sacrifice, utters his speech. Thrice he utters him. Verily thus, he chooses the udgatars. The agrayana is Prajapata, in that he utters him after taking the agrayana. Verily this. Thus Prajapata sniffs offspring. Therefore the cow sniffs the calf on birth. The agrayana is the self of the sacrifice. At each pressing he draws it. Early he continues the sacrifice in itself. He brings it up from above. Verily thus he impregnates seed. He takes it from below. Verily he generates it. The theologians say, for what reason does the Gayatri, the least of the meters, support the pressing? The agrayana is the calf of the Gayatri. Verily, turning back towards it, it supports all the pressings. Therefore a cow turns back towards the calf, which is taken away. And sometimes we have all the gods mentioned and the all gods. Well, there would be light beings that are of universal importance and those of particular importance, although there being different ones, there would be, some individual aspect or something, but, something that everybody would refer to in one way or another.